Hello and thanks for joining us today on City Talk. I'm Maria Sorreo. I'm here at Trump National, joined by City Council member Brian Campbell. Brian, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Maria.
Now, Brian, usually we're talking about political and city issues with you, but today it's really just about you. We want to get to know you a little bit better. I know that you didn't grow up in California. You were born in Ohio and grew up in Colorado. Is that right?
That's correct.
Let's start there then.
Okay.
Okay.
I was born in Toledo, Ohio, but as a very young boy moved to Colorado. My dad worked for a company called Ball Corporation.
Yes.
And he was a patent attorney with their aerospace division. So we were fortunate enough as children to be moved to Boulder, Colorado, and that's where we grew up.
What was it like in Boulder? I know that a lot of people love living in that area.
When we moved there, it was a very small town. It was maybe 25,000 people.
Sure.
And the University of Colorado was probably 15,000 of that. So it was very much a university town. So I grew up with that great positive experience of having so much creativity in education and an outdoor environment and hiking, and it was a terrific place to grow up for myself and my brothers and sister.
I was going to ask you that. I know you have siblings. Tell us about them.
Got an older sister. She's the oldest.
She's the boss, right?
She was the boss.
Okay.
She was 8 years older than me, so
Okay.
I very much looked up to her and very much obeyed her.
Okay.
And
You're a good brother.
And I've got an older brother that's 3 years older than me. He
All right.
lives in Arizona. My sister lives in Mexico now.
Okay.
And then my younger brother lives in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Wow.
He's about 2 years younger than me.
He stayed closer to home.
He did.
And your parents are still in Colorado, is that
My
right?
parents are still in Colorado. They're both in their mid-80s. My dad was a World War II veteran, and he met my mom immediately after the war, and here I am.
Fell in love, that was it.
Right.
Now, your mom has an interesting story, because I know that she fought for women's rights. She was part Cherokee Indian, is that right?
My mom's 1/4 Cherokee. I'm
Okay.
1/8 Cherokee
Okay.
Indian. And when she was growing up in Virginia, back
Right.
during the Great Depression, there was not nearly the tolerance or colorblindness that we have now in our society.
Right.
And so my mom, as a very young girl, found herself getting shuttled around from relative to relative who didn't really want her. And there was a lot of discrimination against her. I mean, that sounds startling in this day and age.
Right.
But that's the environment that she lived in rural Virginia in the 1930s.
Wow.
So at 13 years old, she left home. She struck out on her own and traveled across the country by train. Back in those days, it took 3 days. And she ended up in San Diego working at the United States Naval Base down there pre-World War II.
Now, is that where she met your dad?
No, she met my dad back in Ohio immediately after the war.
All right, because I know your dad was in the military and you were as well, is that right? Your whole family?
Almost every generation that we've been able to track back has got people that served in the military. I mean, I've got a great-grandfather that was in the Spanish-American War. My grandfather fought in World War I. My father fought in World War II. My older brother served in Vietnam in the Marines. I served in the U.S. Army and was stationed overseas inside the demilitarized zone with North Korea in the late 1970s. So, interestingly, nobody's ever made a career of the military.
Right.
We've always been citizen soldiers, volunteers, went in, did our duty, and then went back to civilian life and lived our lives.
Now, after college, you became a businessman, is that right? Is that?
After college, I volunteered for the Army. I was in a 2-year ROTC program at the University of Colorado, where I graduated from.
Right.
But when I graduated, I was not obligated to go active duty with the military. But at that point, I made the decision that I thought I could probably do the most good and perhaps work on things that were more important to me and what I thought the country needed at the time. And so I volunteered to go active duty. And
is that something you always wanted to do no matter what you were going to get into as a career?
I'd
or?
always been interested in it, probably partly because of just growing up in that environment where my family was always involved in some respect, either in volunteering in the community or volunteering for military service in time of need.
Right.
I mean, my mom fought her whole life
Yes,
for
she
better
did.
rights for women and minorities. So I grew up in a family where every day we talked about this sort of thing. Every day we talked about the injustices that not so much she went through. My mother's a private person, but she was always very concerned about other people and making sure that they didn't have to go through the sort of experiences that she did.
Yeah. Now, was she a stay-at-home mom? She was.
At various times she was. I mean,
Okay.
when we were really growing up, she was, but then she became a businesswoman and was a very successful jeweler and owned her own company, and she was an artist, and she's a lifelong learner. She actually graduated from college when she was in her 60s.
What an amazing accomplishment that is. Everyone says they're going to go back, but your mom actually really did.
My mom actually does it.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
And so, you know, even today, I mean, she studies, she reads, she's active in the community. I mean, I really respect the energy and the effort and the passion that my mom's got.
Sure.
As well as my dad.
Yeah. So how did you get from that life to California?
Once I finished my active duty in the military, I took a job which just coincidentally was in Houston, Texas, and I lived in Houston for 8 years, was in the commercial real estate business. But after a number of years, I started realizing that when I was a kid growing up in Colorado, I was always fascinated with California.
Really? Why? Why was that?
Because I saw California as having everything Colorado had, you know, with the mountains and the outdoorsiness, I guess, to use that word,
Right.
but more.
With the beautiful
look at
ocean.
this.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we've got the ocean in Catalina
Yes.
out there, and so I always saw Southern California as being the epitome of the place to live.
Now, when was the first time you ever visited California?
I visited California briefly, probably when I was on a driving trip with some friends in college. But when I lived in Houston, Texas, a number of us, we played volleyball. And I still play beach volleyball every
Okay.
other week down in Redondo Beach. And we used to come out here on vacation to play volleyball. And one day on the beach, it was just an epiphany where I was standing there, and it was a beautiful day like this, and I was looking up at a tall white building up the coast in Santa Monica. It's called the 100 Wilshire
Yep.
building. And Cesar Pelli, the famous architect, actually designed that. And I was looking at that building, and I thought, I wonder who the commercial office leasing agent is for that building, because I'd like to be that guy.
So you were tying it in.
I was tying it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I thought, why should I keep coming out here for vacation when I'm
Right.
single? I can come out here and do it now. And I decided that afternoon
Isn't
that
it
I was going to
interesting?
move to California, and I was going to become the leasing agent for that building, the 100 Wilshire building.
And were you?
About a year and a half later, I was.
Wow, that's quite an accomplishment.
So that's kind of a funny little story about how I got started.
Well, you know, what's really interesting to me about people that move here from other places, I was born and raised in California, but everyone always has such an interesting story. Either they really wanted to come here, or they came here once and just saw it and said, this is it, I love it here, and here you are. Now, did you move to Palos Verdes when you first came, or did you live somewhere else?
No, I lived down in Redondo Beach. I just rented an apartment. I mean, this was 23 years ago.
Okay.
And from there, I moved up to West LA, close to UCLA, and I lived there for, gosh, probably about 10 years or so.
Okay.
And then when I met my wife, Susie, that's when she and I both moved down to Palos Verdes about 12 and a half years ago.
Now, how did you two meet?
We met in Santa Monica at what was supposed to be a girls' night out.
Oh, how did you get involved, Brian?
She organized a girls' night out with about 8 of her friends.
Okay.
And I was friends with one of her friends who I saw at the gym that Friday afternoon. And she goes, hey, Brian, are you dating anybody right now? And I
Hey.
said, not right now. And she goes, well, why don't you come out? I'm getting together with a few of my friends for dinner. She didn't realize it was supposed to be just the girls. So I showed up at this girls' night out. I was the only guy, and so I kind of crashed the party, but that's where I met her.
There, so it must have worked out okay then.
I think it worked out okay.
You know, it's interesting to me as I read your story because community is very important to you, and I know that you have a young son that went through a lot of medical issues, And I had read that you said that, so many of your neighbors that you didn't even know reached out to you when you were going through your time. Talk a little bit about that, because I think it's so important for people to realize that we sort of weave in and out of their lives because of personal experiences.
Yeah, and I don't talk much about that.
Right.
I mean, we're pretty private, but my youngest son is 6.5 years old now, and when he was born, he had some significant medical issues
Right.
that required a lot of reconstructive surgery.
Right.
And going through that experience of spending years every week up at Children's Hospital in Los Angeles had a profound impact on how I decided to spend the rest of my life.
Right.
And I can definitely say that experience is what led me to run for city council.
Right.
And the reason was I'd always been involved in the community. I'd always volunteered for many different things. But seeing all of the people come out and help us, many of them I didn't really know.
Right.
But boy, they showed up when we needed them. That after he was done with his surgeries, and I'll have to tell you this, we were very lucky because what my young son was suffering from was correctable.
It's great.
And he's fine today.
Yeah, he's great. We remember seeing him at the
Right.
holiday Santa.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And he's in kindergarten now, and
great.
he's doing great. So all that's behind him.
Right.
But the combination of seeing what all of these young families go through
Right.
with their children up at Children's Hospital with problems that are not correctable really changed how I look at things.
Right.
And boy, it's a whole lot better
Yes.
than most of us really think.
Right.
I mean, if we think we've got it tough, and from my perspective, I mean, the things that I had gone through that I thought were difficult
Nothing.
really weren't. I mean,
Right.
even the hardest times
Yes.
when I was in the military on a combat mission inside the DMZ, even those hardest times,
Right.
the difficulty was with me, which I could deal with. What
Sure.
I realized as a parent is that when you've got a son who's going through all this, just that feeling of not being able to do anything for
Sure.
him, it's just out of your hands, is much worse, I think,
Right.
than whatever I ever went through. At least that's how I processed it. But having gone through that period in our lives, I changed my career, I changed my business, I moved everything much closer to home, I redoubled my efforts in the community,
Right.
and I thought ultimately where I could do the best good is on city council.
What's it been like for you since you've been there? What kind of experience has it been so far?
A lot more interesting than I thought.
I think interesting is a good way to put it.
But I've been in office 17 months now.
Okay.
And I can tell you this, it's a lot more work
Than
than
people
I
think,
thought
yeah.
to do the job right. But the satisfaction that I get out of it is much more than I thought as well. I
Okay.
mean, I thought it was going to be much more involved in just the bureaucracy and thousands of pages of reports and things like this. And what I realized is, as a member of city council, there's a lot of flexibility that you've got in how you can approach the job.
Right.
If you want to be a policy wonk, you can be one. If you want to be out there in the community and communicating more with people, you can do that.
Right.
There's lots of different personal styles and skill sets that can work on city council.
Right.
One of my goals, now that I'm part of city council now, is to encourage as many good people, and Rancho Palos Verdes has got a lot
of really great people.
really good people
Yes.
that would be tremendous council people, way more than I think most people realize.
I agree.
Is to encourage them to come out and run, and also do what I can to help create a political environment where people feel safe enough to run.
To do it, right.
I mean, I think one of the hallmarks of the election campaign that I went through, there were 7 of us running for 2 seats on council, is we really worked hard to run a positive campaign, not just for us, but to make sure that we could do what we could with the other candidates to create a positive environment. And I think most people agree that that election in 2009, when Anthony Misitich and I came out as the top 2 vote getters, that was the most positive campaign that the city had seen in many, many, many years.
Absolutely.
So one of my goals is to help replicate that going forward. I think it's good for the city. The more former council people we can have,
Right.
as the years go by, I think the better off the city is.
Well, and the people get to know you also as part of the community, which is great.
That's very true as well.
Now, what do you like to do away from city council, away from your job? What do you like to do? You said, you mentioned volleyball. What else do you like to do for hobbies?
I am the most boring guy you will ever meet.
TV guy?
And if you need proof of that, just ask my wife.
Okay.
But, I really enjoy my work. I'm in the commercial real estate business.
Right.
And
But you got to do something for fun, Brian.
I play volleyball occasionally,
that's good.
every other week.
All right.
I spend a lot of time with my kids.
You do. And do
And
they play sports? What kind of things do
They're
your kids
always
like
involved
to do?
in sports.
That's what I thought.
It's baseball season right now.
Right, absolutely.
But they both play flag football,
Okay.
basketball, soccer. I mean, we're always doing
Out.
sports. They've got. We tell our kids. My oldest is 9, my youngest is 6.5. But we tell them, you got 4 things to focus on in life. That's it. Your life is simple. And number 1 is eat everything your mom makes you, because
Right.
it's pretty healthy.
It's good for you. Yep.
Number 2, try hard at school, because the better you do at school, the more freedom you'll have later on in life.
True.
Number 3, have friends. Find new friends. You can never have too many friends.
Sure.
And number 4, sports.
There you go.
Just sports. Your life's simple. It's great. Believe me, it gets a whole lot more complicated when you get older.
It definitely does.
But-
Did you play sports growing up yourself?
I did. My parents always had me involved in something year-round.
Okay.
I was never really any good at much of anything except swimming. That's probably not true. I was probably an above-average athlete at just about everything, but definitely not a standout.
Did you like to try different sports? Was that?
Oh, in high school, I went out for the golf team, the track team, the swimming team, the basketball team, the baseball team.
There you go.
And I could tell you, I got cut from the baseball team, the golf team, the basketball team, the track team. I would try anything, but I actually was a halfway decent swimmer.
Okay.
In high school, and I ended up being a walk-on at the University of Colorado. So I swam my
You were pretty
freshman-
good. You were a pretty good swimmer then, Brian.
Better than average.
Okay.
Better than average.
That's good. Now I have to ask you, because we're on a beautiful golf course here at Trump National. Are you a golfer?
I love golf.
Okay.
I love golf. I don't play as much as I did before the kids came, but
Sure.
I absolutely love golf.
Great. Now, I know this is a huge question, but of everything in our community, what do you like the most about living here? I know it's a tough one.
That is a tough question.
Yes. Is there something?
Well, you're gonna have to go off camera with that for a minute. I don't know if it's the pelicans up there, or the dolphins, or the schools, or our neighbors. I don't know. But I've lived here longer than it's only been 12 and a half years, but
Right.
I've lived here longer in Rancho Palos Verdes than any place I've ever lived. So perhaps what I like most is that it is really home.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And for the first time, probably in my life, there's nowhere else that I really aspire to be. This is it. So, I'm here for the duration, and look at this.
I know, that's
it's
the
what I
thing.
dreamed of when I was a little boy growing up in Colorado, and thinking of how great Southern California was, and listening to the Beach Boys and things like that. This is it.
There you go. So
And we're sitting here at Trump.
it
who
doesn't
knew?
get too much better than that. Brian Campbell, thank you so much for being with us and
Okay.
sharing a little bit of your life today.
Okay.
And thank you so much for watching City Talk. I'm Maria Sorreo, and we will see you next time.